Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I just got myself a haircut and now I look like my mother from the 90s. But anyway, what I want to spend today's video talking about is a champion who I believe is perfectly designed. Not the strongest, not the best, not the one with the flashiest yellow numbers, not the one who's the most broken defensively, but a champion who is the most balanced, the most meticulously thought through, a champion that has planted themselves so fairly in their class, both offensively and defensively. I just had to make a video about them. This champion is Kindred. So let's get into it. So where do we start when we talk about Kindred? Well, it's very easy to think of Kindred as just this defensive monster, right? He came into the game and he was advertised as a defender, sold as a defender, and he was bought by the Whales because he was a defender. But I'm going to make the case in this video that Kindred is not only a great defender, but also a perfectly balanced all-rounder. So he's perfectly balanced not just defensively, but also offensively. And Kindred's offensive story really kicks off at the end of 2023 with the introduction of the Maestro. So what the Maestro did for Kindred was it gave him purpose. When he was initially released, in vanilla matchups like the one you're seeing now, his damage was underwhelming, and compared to top damage options in the Mystic class that were coming out at the same time and already existed, he really wasn't there. You weren't going to be using Kindred for anything where you had another option. But then Maestro came into the game, and Maestro was advertised as this big bad defender that you got for exploring Necropolis, and if you overcame that challenge, then you could really punish your opponent. I think that was great champion design, but built into his kit was this vulnerability to Kindred, and Kindred alone. So at the time, Kindred was the only champion with access to these atrophy passives that he deals on his centipede attacks, and they reduce the duration of the opponent's buffs. But they also had some particular applications to Maestro. So against Maestro, when under the influence of atrophy, obviously not only do his buffs, like his glancing buff, last significantly less time, which is very useful when fighting a Maestro, but also the potency of his cosmic radiation is significantly reduced. And when he enters his passive god mode, damage mode, when he gains 40 neutronium, he loses that neutronium significantly faster while under the influence of an atrophy passive. So what this did was it gave Kindred purpose, and now if you had a Kindred, not only did you have a defender that at the time was very, very scary, still is, but you also had one of the safest counters to Maestro, if not the safest counter in the entire game. So this fits even better into the narrative that Kindred is this perfectly designed champion. Not only is he obviously a great defender, but he also has purpose and targets in Mystic matchups that he hits very, very well. So he was designed to take Maestro when he was eventually added, and also when you add in the Mystic Dispersion Mastery, and there are lots of buffs, two things that should really amp up the performance of any well-designed Mystic champion, I'm going to make the claim that this man does actually hit, right? You can see this vanilla matchup here, not much of either going on. I don't run high MD, and there aren't many buffs going on, but he's still going to take down this Captain Marvel, I believe, in just over 70 seconds. And when you add in buffs and Mystic Dispersion, then you can lock in and pause, basically permanently, your passive degenerations by cycling your SP1 over and over and over, dealing bursts of damage and dealing all that DOT. As long as your opponent isn't really resistant to degen, or they're not shrugging your debuff, then that damage is going to remain as long as there is buffs and Mystic Dispersion. So he really synergizes well with what typically makes Mystic champions better, which is just, for me, great design. Kindred's damage, we know it's not the best, but that's what we come to expect from a defensively tuned champion, and I genuinely believe he's one of those champions, similar to Bullseye in fact, who just benefit quite a lot from being at the maximum rank and the maximum rarity. He really benefits a lot more than most champs from that boost, and I'll tell you, in Battlegrounds and just in general story content, I found him to be okay. He's not the best option, but he's someone that you can use, and in some cases you'll want to use. So in between challenges in the Autumn of Agony, Spring of Sorrow, Summer of Suffering, whatever the seasons are, I can't even be asked, Winter of Woe, I have been using this guy just as a bit of fun, just to see how he performs, and there have been a lot of solos. I've been doing a lot of solos, getting a lot of champs quite close to 0, and, you know, just in general, he has his targets, offensive targets, that are hit decently well, and after we dispatch of this Juggernaut, we're going to go into a Maestro matchup from the most recent Battlegrounds meta against a very, very fat Maestro to see how he works in a less vanilla matchup. So that Juggernaut goes down just under 90 seconds. Okay, you're not a perfect unstoppable counter, that's something to expect. And here we're going to have a look at this Maestro. So this was in the first meta of last season, and this is basically his ideal scenario. In this meta, Hazard Shift Maestro was really very nasty, and this allows me to talk about something else that's quite nice about Kindred, his immunities. He's double immune. He doesn't have ridiculous or niche immunities. He's immune to Poison and Incinerate. Poison is the most common immunity in the entire game, and Incinerate, yeah, okay, that's useful, I suppose. It gives him some applications against Mephisto. It gives him some applications against Bishop. Is he going to be the best counter to those? No. But will he be useful? Yeah. And that's all he needs to do. He's already a fantastic defender. We'll get into that a little bit later. But as long as he hits his targets offensively, which he does very, very well, then that's great design in my book. You can see Maestro gained his glancing and his pierce, and then they just fell away again. And this is as thick as a Maestro gets. This is rank 3, awakened Maestro on a very tough node, and just in one cycle of damage, he's down below 10%. Irritatingly, he is going to gain his Cosmic Radiation or his buffs again, but it's barely going to deal any damage, because my Atrophy reduces its potency. And Maestro's going to go down in just over a minute, 48.5k. In that meta, that was about as good as it gets, right? That, you know, if you got lucky with Titanium, I think you could do it in 50k. I think Deathless Thanos had some decent fights that maybe been over that. But Kindred hitting his marks very, very well offensively, enough to beat out Medusa. And now I think we're going to get a little bit of an opportunity to talk about this guy defensively, which is, of course, where he's designed for. So that was point 1 as to why I believe Kindred is perfectly designed. He has his attacking targets, and he meets those targets very, very well without being completely broken, as is what we expect from a defensively tuned champion, but he does what he's supposed to do very, very well. Reason number 2. This guy's obviously designed to be a defender, but he's probably the most balanced defender in the entire game. Yes, there are some champs that are going to struggle. Yes, there are certain champs that are going to do very, very well. But Kindred is a champion who you can theoretically take with anyone. He's punishing, but also doesn't require this ultra-specific RPG counter. You can just go in, and as long as you're a skilled player, you will thrive in matchups against Kindred. He is the perfect balance between needing a champion or wanting a champion who is going to do slightly better and actually getting some skill. He's very challenging without being impossible. So, as the proud owner of a 7-star rank 3 version of Kindred, I can say with pretty good authority who I believe to be the best campers in the game. Number 1, just unequivocally, is Tigra. Of any rank, of any rarity, it really doesn't matter. This is a 3-star Tigra taking a rank 3 Kindred at a very high sig. And yeah, I'm going to enter Nightmare Outbreak here, and I'm going to go down to 4%. Not fun, but I am about to do the rest of this fight at 4%. Okay? What makes Tigra so good for this is that she can just instantly punish his SP1 and get that pause on his damage ramp. So you just phase through the final projectile and you're good to go. It eliminates any block damage you may take, any chip damage, and her additional power gain makes it such that when you get him to 5% and you get rooted, odds are you're going to have a special ready and all is going to be well. And if you get decent AI with a Kindred against Tigra, and by decent AI you don't need much, it's just does he throw his L1 vaguely efficiently, then you can probably get him down without him even triggering the root. I've had that Tigra takes him perfectly. Probably number 2, you can see there. Just getting rid of the root, it's not going to matter. Number 2, best counter is probably Spider-Ham. His Porker Poppers take Kindred down essentially instantly. He's probably very close to Tigra in terms of speed, and in the hands of the right player, maybe even faster. And he's a bit of an RPG counter as well because he gains that degen resistance with his spider nonsense. And coming in at number 3 for third best counter, probably a tie between Titania and Luke Cage. Luke Cage is fantastic, just shuts him down completely with his concussion, and Titania is Titania. I'd say it's very difficult to choose between those two. Definitely depends on the player. And, well, this fight, the fight you're seeing here, is actually going to be a really good showcase, because I have a great counter. I have Spider-Ham, and yet I'm going to mess up. I'm going to get caught in that route, and if you are not paying attention with Kindred, then you can end up getting smacked. And that is the way it should be. So that leads me on to reason number 3 as to why I believe Kindred is perfectly designed, and that is his awakened ability. So as we all know, Kindred gains an awful lot from his awakened ability. When he goes to 5%, he locks you in a route, he enters Nightmare Outbreak if he has over 30 charges, and you just deal an enormous amount of degen damage to the opponent. Unless they have a special attack, you are going to lose that round on Battlegrounds if that happens to you, unless you are somehow degen resistant or DOT resistant. So, a lot of people think that Kindred absolutely requires Sig 200 to be useful on defense. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Maybe now, maybe more than ever, he does, but I took this guy to 7-star rank 3 unawakened. And I did that, I think, when 8.4 came out. So, can't remember exactly when that was. But at that time, I could take Kindred to 7-star rank 3 and still win rounds at a decent level in Battlegrounds. Not that, like, Celestial 1 sort of level, but at a decently high level. You know the level that I play at. I'm a high-quality player, and I'd still be winning rounds in Battlegrounds because, fundamentally, you know, 5% and all the challenges that come with getting Kindred to that level, you know, they exist. But you still have to get Kindred to that level, and in the meantime, you have to deal with the chip damage from the L1, you have to deal with actually punishing his special attacks unless he's going to go into Nightmare Outbreak prematurely, and he is still challenging. So, okay, now, as rank 3s are more common, I would certainly not be running Kindred unawakened at my level, but look, back to what we were saying about Kindred not requiring an RPG counter, he exploits your skill. If you're up against an opponent who just can't fight Kindred, or doesn't know how to fight Kindred, they're still going to get screwed over, unawakened or not. That's what I love about Kindred, right? The awakened ability, all that actually does is ensures that he is a defensive threat. But it doesn't mean that he's not a defensive threat without it. He definitely still is a problem to a lot of players who struggle to punish his L1, or if you get a little bit unlucky with his AI, throwing random heavies, gaining Nightmare Outbreak even faster, he's still going to degenerate you quite a lot. So, Kindred is a champion who doesn't require the awakened ability, hits his offensive targets really, really nicely, and on defense, while he is scary, he exploits the opponent's skill and not their money. So, those are all the reasons why I believe Kindred is the perfect champion in Marvel Contest of Champions. Now, I will say, before I started making this video, I had the idea in my head about Kindred, but then I thought, okay, well, I need to be sensible. What other champions could possibly earn this title? And there are a few that came to mind. I think, before anyone shouts at me in the comments, just listen to this bit of the video, because I certainly had Spider-Ham in mind, I had Warlock in mind, I even had the Mr. Sinister buff in mind, I had Elsa Bloodstone, Hitmonkey. Yeah, I think there are lots of really, really well-designed champions in the game, but I wanted to make a video on Kindred purely because of the way his defensive kit works with exploiting your skill. because I was really, really close to picking one of either Sinister or Warlock to do this video on instead. But someone like Warlock, you actually need a decent RPG counter. Like, you're going to get power burned, not power burned, power drained, degened, you know, your specials can't be critical, he's bleeding poison immune. He has a massive wall armor up, and he's just generally really irritating. And he's going to apply an armor break and a shock, and he's going to heal block you. Like, he actually has quite a lot going on, and you can't take Warlock with anyone. You just can't. And same with Mr. Sinister, right? You probably need a heal block counter to deal with him effectively, or a robot, because otherwise you're just pushing L2s, and that gets really annoying. And it's, yeah, I just wanted to make a video on Kindred. Because I think that apart from one very small snag, which I'll get into in a moment, he really shines above the rest, just in that department. But my one and only slight complaint for Kindred is actually, you know, I just talked about his awakened ability, but actually it is his awakened ability. Because it's more about his time of release, really. If they released Kindred 6 months later, I'd say this is perfect, because he was released at a time when 6-stars were maturing. You know, people were getting a lot of 6-star rank 4s. We were working towards 6-star rank 5s, but you know, 6 stones were still quite difficult to come by, especially for free-to-play players. And obviously the whales bought him, and they were the ones who were capable of really maximizing his defensive potential, while other people, you know, they might get lucky from a crystal, but even then, you're probably not going to be able to awaken him. You're probably not going to be able to sig him up. And I suppose that was really the only imbalance that I could think of in Kindred's kit. Just his time of release. If he was released 6 months later with 6-star 6 stones more readily available in the community, I would be genuinely impressed. Like, completely 100% convinced that this man is perfect. And I basically am already. But that's just one tiny snag. As I mentioned, he doesn't absolutely need to be awakened to be a menace. Certainly not offensively. I think he does great stuff offensively without it. But yeah, that'll be my one and only snag. And saying that, I think that is just about all I have for you today. Leave a comment down below if you think Kindred is perfect, or even if you don't. Let's get a debate going. Thank you very much for watching, and bye-bye.